life of an artist is no less exciting than that of a gypsy. Just imagine yourself coming back from a round the world trip after traveling to several different places. Of course, you must have enjoyed yourself, but when you return home after a long time, it is somewhere deep down psychologically very comforting. I feel most of you will agree with me on this. So, where we were in the story, let me take you back to that. By this time, I had already collaborated with many eminent musicians of the field, and as a result of that, I learned much more than just music, surprisingly, and I was not expecting that. Each of them were unique in their own way, had their own mantra to success. Leisure times brought some fresh melodies in my mind, which I liked to hum meanwhile. And there was nothing more to it, I believed, at that moment. And I enjoyed it as nothing but just a secret hobby, you can say. But if at all there was anything more to it, I was completely unaware of that. So, out of the thrill that it gave me and the fun I had while doing it, and out of curiosity also, began a new adventure that was all about digging what lies within. Funnily, sometimes our homes can contain stuff which are extremely valuable, and this might not be even in our knowledge. So, same happened with me. By home, I meant our core. So, home here signifies our core, what lies inside us, identifying that. Chapter 7 is all about that. Welcome to Home Sweet Home. Mindfulness to me is very essential while living, to live consciously. I made these new patterns and melodic phrases, and it was nothing more than just a game to me. It was as organic as breathing, and not always we pay attention to our breath. A yoga instructor and a blocked nose reminds us of the power of breathing. After a certain point, those scattered phrases became sizable enough to be called tunes. But I still didn't bother to store them. When I shared these with my parents, this is what they said. If you develop this skill, you can become a composer someday. I always got their unbiased opinion on whatever I did, and as people, they are not blindfolded to their child's flaws and limitations. Unlike many others, this left me with a lot of confusion. If they are saying so, there might be something more to it, and I should consider it. But this was not my plan. This was never my plan, to be more precise, and hence I never ever considered having this, by this I mean becoming a composer, as part of my aspirations list. But things do not always happen as per our imagination. The rejections I faced were not part of my dreams either, but I faced them. But now I look back at that time, I have to laugh at my rigidity and how I concluded when they told me so, that I cannot become a composer. You have to be born with that to become a composer. It's an X factor. I was very skeptical, and so skeptical that I could not see the route that can take me to my creative best. Take away my parents' foresightedness, I am sure of it that this road would have always remained unexplored by me. While learning a rag, I used to practice the key phrases or simply its scale repeatedly till I reached a point the rag root became familiar. For example, Ni re ga ma da ni re ga re sa ni da ba ma ga re, ni re ga ma da ni re ga re sa ni da ba ma ga re. Ni re ga ma da ni re ga re sa ni da ba ma ga re, ni re ga ma da ni re ga re sa ni da ba ma ga re. The root of Yaman. So by practicing it, I become more familiar with it. And with familiarity comes confidence and ease. The known is recorded in the memory and immersed in habit, and thus makes you comfortable. The partially known, when interests you, induce curiosity, and when it does not, probably results in your departure. And the unknown induces fear in some, resistance in some, and sometimes both in many. How can you act as a barrier for yourself? And how this attitude stops you from realizing your true potential was the crux of my speech when I went to the TED Youth event for my talk. The main task is to develop the sight, sense, and wisdom to know and become who we already are. So I started journeying with my melodies, and after a point, I realized that they need a mate to be complete. In this case, the mate was lyric. I do not think that I have the same flow or effortlessness while I write, which I have when I compose. So, this is a feeling that I have about myself till now. But initially, when I started as a songwriter, it was much more. This margin was longer and much more than it is today. So, getting my tunes married to good lyrics felt like a huge challenge indeed. I don't like to make this whole process a very intellectual process, but it took a lot of cerebral effort on my part when I tried to write on my tunes. I'll be honest with you. Initially, this happened much more. Today, I'm at a stage, I have reached a phase as a musician when I can bring in consideration the factors like a subject of the song, its mood, a narrative maybe, or sometimes maybe a story which I have imagined or which I want to portray in the video of the song, or a lyric which through which I maybe want to create some visuals in front of the listener. So I can keep these factors in mind today, but back then it was really difficult. And in songwriting, there are several different confinements. When I began as a songwriter, I had several stumbling points, which I just mentioned. Even if I got original thoughts in abundance, there are confinements such as length of the phrases, lines, the certain way or a way a certain melody unfolds, and so much more that is abstract. Understanding of scansion in songwriting is a basic need which was there thankfully as I'm a musician. New thoughts were born with philosophies and emotions that creeped up inside as life progressed, and it is nothing exceptional. I worked on rhyming, and I'm glad that on a very few occasions I had to alter the tune to make the lyric work. Thankfully. Had I been an actor, this would be that stage where I was busy learning the lines and memorizing them. Becoming a character and portrayal of that comes much later. My zero knowledge about acting gives me absolutely no authority to say this, but as somebody with some common sense, I feel that I can only act comfortably or just be who I need to be when my part is learnt by heart. So the next thing I did was I played the handful of songs which I had made till then to my parents first, and also to next to a few colleagues in the music circle that I have to absorb whatever came my way, and I was ready for both appreciation and criticism. And these few friends who I played my songs to were into music by passion. And that's the reason why I chose them as my first listeners. I was developing this objective listening skill, and I have mostly been very, very critical towards my work in music and also in life, and this temperament helped me as a composer. Since I was new in this, nobody had any preconceived notion or expectation from me, and most found my songs to be original and fresh. There are other departments in music production like arrangement, programming, recording, mixing, and mastering, which are equally important. The specialized people in these areas bring out the best version a composition can have and take it to a whole new height. When I went to some programmer friends of mine to get my songs arranged, their inputs and support worked like magic. If I did all of this on my own, I wouldn't have known their style and perspective. When a programmer is a musician himself or herself, that adds greatly to the music I conceive. An instrumentalist feels at ease with the instrument he or she plays. When a guitarist is arranging, it is likely that guitar will be predominant in the track. The people who can come out of that bias, and cater to the needs of the song are fluid, as their forte is not their hindrance. As music is a special sort of a sound that we hear, another way to look at a production is its sound texture, tone, dynamics, and design. I was absolutely surprised to discover some insights on sound from my work colleague Akshay Menon, who is a wonderful pianist and music producer himself, based in Bombay or Mumbai. He told me that in the world of sound, something that is modern in 2019 will be considered dated by the time you reach 2020. Can you imagine how fast it moves? Just like electronic gadgets, sounds also get updated and changed very quickly. But the project you're associated with ultimately determines the sound. Above all, supposedly, I am given a film for which I have to compose, which has the backdrop of 70s, say. In that case, it will demand a soundscape that reflects the music which used to mark that decade. In that era, something that was popular, the sound palette that was used during that time. As an independent artist, if I want to pay tribute to a yesteryear legend, I might create something on that space. I used all these examples to show how important sound design is in music today. It can change the degree of impact a song will ultimately have on the listener. Speaking of sound, here I come to the balancing act, mixing and mastering. The edge, warmth, volume, modulation, and dynamics of a track are only a few of the definable aspects on which a sound engineer works. This person's skill is like a medium through which the thoughts of a composer, writer, instrumentalist, singer, and music producer reaches out to the audience exactly how they want to. The last stage before the final output is so crucial that it can even make or break a song. This is tougher when a soundtrack is heavy and has many instruments played in it. Vocal processing and treatment, depending on the singing style and the song, is another part of it. Knowledge of sound and understanding in music, for me at least, these things decide the grade of a mixing and mastering engineer who works on songs. The one who understands the craft does wonders sitting on the console. Something I could have learned being a singer for so many years, more than a decade now, I learned strangely, intensely as a composer. And that is the importance of vocal cultures. The ways of adaptation are the ones devised by me as per the experiences gathered over the years. A. Faster approach. Under this, let's discuss some of the ways. 1. Listening to artists who made a genre popular to learn that style. Number 2. Going blindly by what a composer wants in case of recording a song that demands a style you haven't tried before. 3. Copying the expressions of the composer also works, as he or she will emote his or her creation most naturally. 4. It is a coincidence if the state of mind of the singer matches the mood of the song. In case I'm recording a dark song in a happy and peaceful day, I read the lyrics several times. If I don't get it even then, by not getting it, I meant not getting the emotion of the song. So if I don't get it even then, I try to recall something tragic or bitter that happened to me, or imagine and live a painful event in my mind, which might happen. This is quite tricky, but we can make our minds believe in a thing temporarily if we want to. Number 5. If a composer, songwriter, and singer is the same person, taking the feedback of others involved in the process, like people like programmer, engineer, casual listeners, sound recordist, or the listeners around you, like your parents maybe, or your siblings, cousins, or other family members, or some friend of yours who is not a musician can also give you a fresh perspective or unbiased opinion. And that is what I rely on a lot. When we perform, the people watching us can judge us better than we can, in my opinion. Number 6. Utter the words in rhythm, like recitation in a rhythm cycle. When we eliminate the melody, our minds don't have to multitask. I do this in case of some South Indian movie songs. It helps me a lot with the diction. When we don't have to multitask, the focus remains solely on the lyric, scansion, and emotion. Thereafter, one can easily figure out which words to stress upon. Let's come to B, which is the slower approach. I'll discuss this method with all of you as a whole, as I have not broken it down in points like 1, 2, 3, 4. If we want to get to the bottom of something, it is going to be time consuming than the previous approach. There are numerous long ways of adaptation. Each genre has an origin. It is always interesting to go back in history to find the source, where a particular genre or style of music was born, brought up, and spread. In case of many folk forms, the culture, habits, and life of people singing a genre and celebrating it also contributes to the overall feel and the kind of lyric their songs will have. Geography unknowingly plays a role in shaping up the vocal textures of a certain region and singing techniques eventually. That is another angle altogether. Studying the lives of a particular community that gave birth to new singing tradition like Thumri and Dadra in Indian classical music, for an example. And also, if possible, living that life for some time to be immersed in it are ways which might not be feasible in today's fast-paced work environment. And it might not sound practical also. But diving into an unknown world can be very adventurous and enriching once in a blue moon. I come to the comparison of both the approaches now. The first method is more convenient as we touch the surface of something for a short span of time. But in this, it is also likely that we forget the experience quickly because of the method's superficial nature. Faster one is more goal-driven, while the slower one is more journey-driven. Both have their pros and cons, but neither of the two will fall short when it comes to their effectiveness. This was a sneak peek at the various ways of adapting to new styles. Being a composer has bettered me as a listener also. I can see a soundtrack as a whole now. The parallel lines, be it a bass line, obligato, rhythm section, or anything submissive in the track, reaches me clearly now, and hence has led to a deep realization that music is broad and grand when it is inclusive. Even the elements that go unnoticed by a layman add to the overall impact of a production. When we practice yoga postures, it is not solely one or two of them, but the sequence of poses designed in a certain way that lead to relaxation at the end of the practice. This does not mean the same routine will have the same effects on every body. Even if the body remains the same, the balance and energy is not the same every day. The present age and current needs of the body should decide the routine and type of practice. In case of music, I can replace the body with the main melody or the song. Inclusiveness must not be unnecessarily practiced. My first composition, Kagoje Noko, that had only vocals and acoustic guitar, was loved by my followers and appreciated by many of my seniors in the industry. It never sounded naked to me, despite having so less elements than usual. The richness of one's musicality, the uniqueness of ideas shared by the team members, and the honesty and integrity of the creators can do wonders. Before wrapping up the chapter, I would like to touch down another point which goes really well with the name of the chapter, that is Home Sweet Home. The influence of rags. Yes, the influence of Indian rags in my music, in some of my compositions, is not mere liking towards Indian classical music. I believe we absorb the most from our environment in our growing years. That is the reason why what we are fed, or what we receive rather, in our lives from the environment we are in and from the people we are surrounded by, in the first quarter of our lives is of paramount importance, because that is the time when we have the maximum energy and enthusiasm to learn, know something, and remember that. I am truly lucky and blessed to have got the taste of something so rich at such a tender age. I love coming back home whenever I have to, as a composer. When you have such strong roots to fall back on, you can also use it as a shelter. although I haven't done this before, but it is possible to have rag as a starting point while making a tune. This idea and knowledge of rags can be a savior in such times. Composing and writing makes me delve into different aspects of music and life, and I saw how connected the two are. They are kind of directly proportional. The more internalized I become, the more I felt grounded to Mother Earth, and this created the perfect setup for new flowers to bloom. I cannot believe that this power of creation, which gives me eternal happiness, is the only source of long lasting bliss for me. And I had this all this while lying unnoticed in my inner universe. When music happens, yoga happens. Yoga, by that I mean union, connection. When music happened for me, yoga also happened simultaneously. And I realized that I didn't return home, but I was home all throughout. The only development was that I see it more clearly now because of my yogic drug.